All right, thank you. Well, hello everyone who's joining today and everyone who's tuned in. This is our little presentation as part of the 2021 CISO Forum put on by CyberX. I'm joined today by Kelley Irwin and Juan Valbuena, who's they're going to be talking about put a SOC in it, which is a very, very cute way of talking about security operations and some of the questions around instituting security operations, types of security operations, and generally why we should still have security operations, either be it a managed service or internal, with our organizations, and why it's important to really put some investment into that kind of field. So I'm with my colleagues here, and I'll hand over to Juan to introduce himself. And Juan, if you want to start off.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today at this panel. I'm very looking forward to the conversation with Kelley and George about having a SOC in place, and if possible, share a little bit my experience doing that. I am currently a director for cybersecurity at Yamana Gold. It's a global function. I look after IT and OT security. I have been doing this kind of a role for 300 years outside Yamana as well. But I had some kind of background as a consultant over 15 years, mainly in the UK and Europe. So that's it. I'm very looking forward to the conversation. Thank you. Over to you, Kelley.
Thanks, Juan. Kelley Irwin, and I'm the CIO at Electrical Safety Authority with a huge passion for information security and cyber. And I will tell you that I spent about 25 years in large banking and insurance companies, and now I'm working for an Ontario regulator, the Electrical Safety Authority, and it's a huge difference in the scale of the organization, but also the focus around safety for people in Ontario, as opposed to corporate culture where you're looking at protecting the assets for the financial value. So I would just say that I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and I think that I've learned it doesn't matter the size of the organization or the goal of the organization, cyber security and making sure you're protecting your assets has the same feeling and the same emotion and the same risk and the same worry for CIOs and CISOs.
Thank you, Kelley. And I guess, two really good introductions. I should probably introduce who I am as well. My name is George Al-Koura. I'm your moderator. I am the CISO at Ruby Life Incorporated. Ruby is an online dating company. We run several platforms, Ashley Madison being one of them. And folks who've been around the InfoSec game kind of would know that name as well for a while. For my background personally, I come from a defense and security background. I spent the first part of my career working in the military, having nothing to do with information security, up until about 2015, 2016. I worked kind of more in the intelligence world. Then I got into InfoSec. I started off as a level 1 analyst working at an MSP at a global consulting firm. From there, I eventually worked my way up, got into cyber threat intelligence, and then eventually, I started working kind of at the senior level and really determining security operations as a whole and contributing to policy issues as well for public-private relations with the government of Canada. My foray into Ruby is my first kind of step into the non-defense security commercial world. And as I was telling our friends here before the call, I'm actually having a blast because InfoSec is InfoSec regardless of what type of organization you're working for. So we'll just kick right into the conversation. We'll start off with the first question, and it'll be a toss in the air to see who wants to take it first. But the question is this: given the growing costs of standing up, staffing, and maintaining a functional security operation, while the whole of our economy across all organizations now need dedicated InfoSec operations to address the threat risks to their ever-growing attack surfaces, do you believe that the future of InfoSec rests in standing up in-house capabilities or outsourcing to more managed service providers? So we'll start this off with Juan. What do you think?
So it's a big question, and definitely it depends on the organization and a number of factors as well, right? So So one of the kind of key factors that you may need to consider is whether you have availability of resources around the location, right? So where do you need them? If you try to set up a kind of a SOC with in-house resources in an area that is a remote and no skill around, it's going to be difficult to kind of hire it. So definitely there's one thing, whether you will have the resources available. The other thing is the budget, right? So what kind of budget you have, and whether it's kind of the headcount that you have in your organization to kind of staff up a SOC function. Now we have to kind of think about the kind of the coverage as well, right? So it's like the 9 to 5, I don't think is an option anymore, right? So we are talking about 24/7 operations, and definitely you will need to kind of consider whether it's going to be shift or not. So definitely those kind of factors will kind of influence what kind of decision you will do. The other thing also, hiring and sustaining a team is challenging, right? So not just because if you find them, but also cannot keep them busy in a way, right? So in a way that keep them entertained, and basically, the demand for cybersecurity is quite high, and how you maintain them happy in a way, right? The other thing is, in my experience, I will always consider outsourcing. That's a better way to kind of guarantee resources available, right? The right skills, the right people, the right coverage. I can scale up or scale down, depending on the kind of the service. There are things that you can have a kind of a consider as well to kind of find the right managed service provider. And they have to fit your organization. They have to fit your culture in a way. And it's something that not always is considered. And you see the conflicts as you are kind of consuming the service at some point in terms of not having the right fit for the organization. So it's not an easy task either, kind of to outsource the service, but definitely that's an area where I will kind of prefer to go in a way.
Thanks, Juan. Kelley, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Juan. There are so many factors to take into consideration when you're staffing for your security operations. And Juan touched on a couple of them that are, top of mind really around, do you find the right resources? Do you have enough of them? Can you keep them busy when you're not having issues? Can you pay for them? And where do they fit into your overall team construct? Not just the IT team, but the overall corporate, the head count as well as the accountabilities and authorities. I think the other reason, so I believe in partnerships, and that partnership can be heavily internal with some augmenting external, heavily external with some augmenting internal, or 50-50, depending on what you're trying to bring from that partnership arrangement. And I would suggest that having that support from an external partner or partners also allows new information to flow naturally within the team. So things that are happening in the industry, things that other companies have experienced that your partner may have been participating in, and can give you those lessons and can give you those heads up if they're in real time. So cyber and information security in general is something that it's evolving every day. We all know that. And attacks are evolving, and the tactics are evolving. So it's a lot to put on one team to try to know all of that information by themselves and stay up to date on it at all times. I will also say that I've experienced as a chief information officer at 2 different organizations being under attack. And fortunately, not to the point where we lost production data, but in one scenario, it was a 48-hour event that was happening in real time, and it's quite stressful as the CIO or as the CISO. At the other organization, it was 72 hours, and I can put myself back in that moment even now, and that one was 5 or 6 years ago. I can feel the emotions as I tell you the story about it, and I can feel the pressure of making the right decisions and taking the right actions so that I'm not jeopardizing the company that I work for. And it's a lot for a person or a team to try to figure out in real time when you're under attack. So having those partners also allows, like, having conversation. What about this? What about that? Have we thought of this? Can we try this? So that you don't feel alone. And in those moments, that's incredibly important. So unless you're a very large organization that can have, in fact, probably hundreds of people to count on, you would probably feel that you'd benefit from that partnership and not trying to do it all yourself.
So I'd have to ask both of you then, just for the sake of the argument, be it either internal investment or outsourcing, how do you, or if you can, sorry, let me reframe in 30 seconds or less. How would you frame a pitch to a non-technical senior executive where their response to your initial questions about, hey, can we get some people hired? Can we get some tooling in place? Can we maybe look at outsourcing certain functions to other shops? When they keep asking the question on, well, what's the return on my investment? If you are a pre-breach organization, you have not yet experienced a security breach. So all they're looking at is they're looking at you as a potential cost center. Or, if you're at a consultancy, then your service has to be stood up and you have to go to market and go through an entire business process that has nothing to do with actual security work. How do you make that pitch then to justify the ROI question or counter from a lot of senior executives who don't want to put money into InfoSec, be it external or internal? And that
You want to go first?
Go ahead, Juan, sorry.
No, I was suggesting that Kelley wants to go first.
Yeah, sure. I think I would just use examples that are real life examples that aren't exaggerating, because I think that what we've done in the IT space and in the security space 20 years ago is we would say, if you don't upgrade your systems are going to collapse. So therefore you have to give me money to upgrade. And it didn't happen. The systems didn't collapse. So it was exaggeration. It was truth that there is a moment where it will break and you can't recover. But we did exaggerate a bit as IT leaders. So I would say don't exaggerate. Pull things from the headlines. Find companies that are similar size or similar discipline that you're in or product that you're in or something, and show them what's happened to these companies. Some companies have gone out of business. Some companies have paid millions of dollars. Some companies have reputational damage that takes 5 or 10 years to get back. And just talk about the stories as opposed to trying to scare them with what can happen in their company, which they may or not believe, but talk about what has actually happened in other companies that they care about.
Yeah, from my side, very similar. So it's a different conversation that I would have had like 10 years ago, trying to talk to an executive about investing in cybersecurity, to the conversation that we'll have now. And the difference is that now there is so much headlines that actually talk about cyber attacks and companies being impacted by it. So when we talk about the potential impact to our organization that they could have and being in the press and so on, it's something that they want to kind of avoid to some extent, right? So, and it kind of comes down to the point about risk appetite and how much they are going to be comfortable facing the board, if it is a public company, on why it wasn't invested or why nothing was done. At the end of the day, it's about business risk. And we, unfortunately, we don't own the risk. It's a business problem. The business will need to take the decision. I think our role and the conversation is all about the potential impact, what is the real risk, and what will happen. And definitely, my point is the press is helping a lot right now, and all the stuff that is happening right now is helping us to kind of make sure that that we have the right support, and that helps. Definitely, that helps because actually, from my perspective, execs will come and say, "Hey, are we okay?" So that's a good thing, right? So that we can actually have this conversation.
How far, I like both of these responses. I have to give it to you guys. I appreciate the perspective that the years in have given you guys. I guess this is kind of more for the audience. What would you say is the highest level or the deepest level of dumb down that you have to do when working with non-technical decision makers, when talking about your IT infrastructure, when talking about your compliance risks, when talking about security and security operations? Because I don't know about you guys, but I found in my career, be it on the client side or be it on my own organization, oftentimes I have to really water down to a very intentional point what it is I'm trying to do so I can get their buy-in. So to me, something might be very compliance level basic. We should be doing this thing. It makes so much sense that we invest a small amount to execute whatever this function is.
Mm.
but then you have to go through an entire campaign to explain it to folks just so they can comprehend it. And this is only step one of like 10 or 15 on an overall plan that you're trying to build a capacity for. How much do you guys find the media has impacted a lot of those folks and have those conversations, which are traditionally frustrating for information security professionals or IT professionals? Do you find that folks are getting more attuned nowadays to what's going on within their organization and that this is something that they have to independently learn, not just a check in the box security awareness training that you have to do a couple times a year? They have to actually be interested in what their systems are.
So if I may, I think it's a very good point. And one thing is pushing information up. That is not always the great idea, but if they start getting that information from many different sources, that helps a lot, right? So it's kind of, at the end of the day, it's about education and how much they really understand. It's not about cyber. It's about the potential impact to them, right? There's one thing that probably I like to add here. It's about cyber insurance. Many organizations will kind of opt to do cyber insurance because they feel it's a good measure to have or kind of good backup financially if something happens. The interesting thing is that cyber insurance companies or underwriters are getting more difficult to kind of provide policies or to fulfill policies, to the point that they are declining a lot of requests for cyber insurance. When a company gets through the process of getting a cyber insurance decline, a policy decline, they start wondering, oh, I have to do something about it because nobody's going to back me up in a way. And that's happening more and more outside the kind of the expense of cyber insurance. But anyway, so that sort of different angles into the exec's head really helps in terms of that raising that level of education.
Yeah, it's a good point about the insurance, which is it's pro and con, right? I think organizations and executives, non-technical executives, are becoming much more aware about the need for cyber insurance, but we don't want it to get to the point that, oh, we have insurance, we don't need to worry. So to your point, George, about, how much do you dumb it down or how do you get that engagement? I always like to use analogies that aren't about technology, because I worked with a gentleman years ago, and he would spend a lot of time educating the executive team and the board on, I used to say, like, everything he knew. And he was, brilliant technically, but they would fall asleep. So I don't think, I learned from that. The answer isn't try to get them to know everything I know. That's my job, not their job, right? But to get them to understand what I know. And so I try to use analogies that aren't technical, and I'll use like a car, or I'll use, I have all kinds of different crazy stories I use that my executive team and board members probably walk away sort of shaking their head, but they don't forget it. So it's like I have insurance on my car, but it doesn't mean I leave my car running with the keys in the door unlocked, because my insurance company may decline that insurance claim, right? So very similar. We have cyber insurance. It doesn't mean we leave our network exposed and that we don't patch our systems because people can get in and steal things before we can call the insurance company. So I just find using real life examples where people go, oh, okay, now I get it. You're talking about the car is running. You're talking, like, it helps to sort of put it in a light that they can understand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think both those perspectives kind of raise a good point. We could probably have an entire session on cyber insurance and the emerging trend in cyber insurance alone, particularly like as it goes into government enforced legislation, which I really believe is going to happen either this mandate or the next in Canada, at least. But I think, Kelley, you also raise a really good point. It's not our job to make ourselves replaceable. I mean, we're in these roles because we are the people. We're supposed to have these skills. I think it's about finding what level of understanding your people, your colleagues need to have, and being the educator to facilitate them reaching that point. Be it from quirky stories or whatever it is, as long as you can capture their attention. No one wants to have the incident, where you might be an important leader at a high level, climate conference or something, and someone catches you on camera passing out. Well, no one wants to have that same thing happen at work either. So I'll move on to the next question, and thanks guys for entertaining me on this. As COVID-19 has forced a massive shift towards cloud-based remote work environments, the number of remote employees and external devices accessing modern networks has absolutely exploded. The trend has led to a larger threat attack surface, thereby creating more vectors of opportunity for bad actors to successfully attack targets. In response, many organizations are relying heavily on VPN gateways to provide encrypted network access at a scale beyond what the solution was originally intended for. This trend has amplified an already difficult time detecting and stopping cyber attacks, even when there are fewer remote and on-site resources at play. As such, security operations teams are now facing the worst-case scenario, preventing cyber threats for an infrastructure that has grown well beyond the confines of traditional security approaches. How do you both think security operations should be constituted to better protect their client organizations as a result of the currently evolving state of business? And Kelley, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I think that for anyone in IT over the last 18 months, our world has turned upside down, and the expectations overnight, if we think about March of 2020, the expectations were on an IT team, we need to do everything we used to do. We need to be able to do it wherever we want to do it. And by the way, make sure that my equipment works and that everything is safe and secure. And there was no playbook, there was no plan, there was no time, right? And it's actually quite astonishing how well organizations stepped up and were able to continue doing business in the way that we are. The threats are real. We have, majority of workers went home and did work where they could. If they didn't have to be on site for certain work, or they're not out in the field doing work like our inspectors, at our company. And so, good hygiene never takes a vacation in security. So having appropriate controls in place, having education. I will tell you, we've ramped up our education and changed it from once a year, you take a course and you probably, hope that you pass and don't really learn much, to doing snippets and having education on a monthly basis, which has hugely impacted in a positive way our risk factor from people opening emails they shouldn't open and exposing us from that way. And I'll use the only probably acronym that I'll use today, so SASE. So now I have to remember what it means, those service access. You guys can probably help me here. Secure access, service edge, which is about, I know what it does and I know to say SASE, but about thinking about the device and the person, and not thinking about the building and the location, which if I think about IT in the past, we worried about the building. We worried about the network in the building. We worried about who walked in our building. We worried about who was sitting out front of our building trying to access our network. But we didn't worry about every person going home with that access and now exposing us from their local Starbucks or from their house or from their mom's house or from their vacation house or from their cottage. And we really need to think about how we know who's coming in and what device they're coming in on, as opposed to the physical, who's walking in the building. And then I'll say the last thing that is really on my mind these days is we haven't, as an organization, I'm sure other organizations have taken this on, but we're just starting to, I would say, add this to our arsenal, is we haven't been educating people on the difference in the physical devices since they went home. So you've taken this device home, and like I said, there are a lot of people that are going to other locations. They're not just going to their home to work remotely and taking this device with them. So we've all talked over the years about secure your device and don't leave it in the back seat, and make sure that you don't take your laptop into a restaurant and leave it on the bench when you go to the washroom and things like that. But have we talked about this differently in the last 18 months? We as an organization haven't. So I would suggest that the physical protection of the devices, because now not only are they out of the building almost 100% of the time, as opposed to only in the evenings or the weekends, but people are using them as their primary device that probably contains more information now than it used to when they were in the building.
I agree. Juan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, just kind of building on that part. If you think about for example, the people that do the monitoring, and let's talk about the SOC analyst. They have a kind of an important tool there to be able to kind of visualize what is happening and be able to do what they normally do. When the pandemic hit, it's not just didn't just affect the end user, right? So also these guys had kind of moved to a home location where the company didn't really have that kind of secure SOC environment. Now they were kind of working from the living room in a way. And I remember reading about the challenges that many companies went through to kind of trying to guarantee the kind of protection of the integrity, let's say, of the SOC analysts as they were kind of monitoring probably multiple companies at the same time, and potentially kind of implementing very disputable sort of monitoring kind of over the kind of the user in a way, right? So like a camera, they will detect all the movements and they have to agree or, to all that kind of thing. So it was definitely a very challenging and definitely as kind of carrying the work around. For some people, it's easier than for others, right? So especially when organizations need to kind of provide a certain trusted environment in a way for them to connect. So, but that's from one side. So, and definitely we have kind of let's say, experienced a similar sort of transition into a more remote locations, very distributed, massive attack surface. User education, as Kelley mentioned, was a part of the answer to that. We also kind of moved from traditional VPN to a more zero trust sort of network or SASE sort of environment architecture. So that's kind of was part of the answer. But in terms of detection and response, and I would like to kind of probably get some thoughts here, but from detection and response was probably the most challenging bit, right? Because detection and response in a way, so requires the right tools to be able to see the network or the traffic and what is coming in and out from these kind of corporate devices, let's call it, that contain sensitive data, whatever they are. Now, moving from on-premise or traditional on-premise sort of environment, moving to a fully remote, many organizations lost completely access or visibility of where the endpoints were. And they were compromised. They didn't know how to help to the user. They help the user to actually do that. So one of the kind of the challenges that I saw a lot, and it's just not unique to us, but it's how organizations start kind of moving and probably acquiring other types of technology, replacing technologies to be able to kind of have the visibility on end user endpoints or end user endpoints where they're fully, distributed everywhere, as well as having the ability to triage, if they need to kind of isolate from the network and eradicate any kind of or clean up the environment, right? So it was kind of a massive sort of transition into getting a bit better prepared or better kind of position or equipped to be able to provide the function of the SOC analyst, right? The detection response and all that kind of thing. So that was very interesting, kind of to watch for. Challenge.
Yeah, I have to agree. Kind of both of you touched on very important points. Kelley, on your point, especially about keeping the frequency of training consistent, not just once a year. I think it's important. I think it's something that, it's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit the security operation can do for themselves and their entire organization to keep security top of mind for folks and how they're conducting themselves, whether at home or whether at quote unquote work, even if work's in their house, using their work equipment on work networks. I know, even with my team, I'm blessed to having a really good team down to each individual member. We also, within our team, we have like a project manager, a security project manager. She kind of, whips the reins on a daily basis, making sure, like, as we're going through our agile methodology. And one thing that she's done, even for me, because I started in September, I have to go through all of our security awareness training. Even though I'm the one that's helping drafting the enforcement policies and making sure that people are doing the thing, she'll still quietly poke me once in a while, be like, hey, so, you still got to do your NGO. So I have nothing but empathy for folks who do have heavy workloads. And it's hard to find the time, but it is important as an organization, especially if we're going to be security first as organizations. And this is hopefully something that more people across the entire economy, regardless of their sector, they start taking a security first approach. They need to look forward to their training. They need to look forward to that security awareness time, because I think it's a time for them to understand, like, oh, I didn't know that you can do that through my phone. Oh, I didn't know that if my wife's phone is plugged into my own internet at home, then someone in theory, if they have the right information, could access her devices or my kids' devices as well, even though they're trying to attack me. A lot of that stuff to us, this is what we do day to day. We could tell you this in our sleep, but for the rest of the world, and it takes me having to have conversations, with my non-technical family or absolutely non-technical friends to realize that a lot of the knowledge that we consider almost inherent is still completely new to them. It's still, what, really? And that kind of educational growth and awareness, I think, is important. Juan, you bring up a really good point about technology, how you actually technologically set up your systems, how you set up your organization, how you set up any kind of security operation, be it something internal or be it if you're outsourcing, getting a consultancy to come in and help you out. If you're enabling them with the best tools, if you're investing in at least ensuring that, for example, you do have zero trust support of your security devices, or you are using multi-factor authentication to make sure that there are additional layers of identity and access control, if you're doing privileged access management to make sure that your secrets are well protected within your organization as well, and you have role-based access control to make sure that people are only touching the things that they need to touch and see. These are very important fundamental steps that I think, regardless of the situation, COVID, pandemic, non-pandemic, business as usual, we should never forget the fundamentals. I would like to also offer a third consideration. This is particularly as we're trying to figure out what successful remote work life looks like. I believe in terms of leadership and management in taking more of a transformational, democratized approach to leadership. I tell my organization, my team all the time, I believe in being a servant leader. My job as a leader isn't just ultimately to be the person accountable for the security organization, but it's to enable the success of everyone on the team at the level of the team and at the individual level as well. I think we are not going to succeed as security professionals if we don't start really taking this human-centric approach to how we conduct ourselves. I think, and I don't know about you guys, I'm putting this out to you guys to both get your thoughts and comments on. I think traditionally the organization really looks at people in terms of certifications and ticks in a box and what role they're trying to fit people into, where really we should be looking at, are these people, or are people critical thinkers? Are we encouraging kind of an environment where they can explore new ideas, where they're encouraged to work hard, yes, but they're also encouraged to learn and to really push the envelope. I don't know, do you guys think that because of some of the traditional ways of doing business and the traditional ways of IT and IT security, we're almost, shooting ourselves in the feet in terms of what we could get out of our people to ensure that they're both happy and successful working in security operations in this remote environment? I'll go back to either Kelley to start.
That's it's an interesting side of it, right? So the human side of what we do and why we do it is important. And your last part of the comment there of how it can bring enjoyment. I try to help people. I've worked in a compliance organization for many, many years, and that was, corporate compliance and fraud and IT security and all these things are tied together by compliance, which has rules that people have to follow. But I've always coached my team to say, we don't want people to follow the rules because we made them, because that leads to, when you stop looking, they stop following the rules. So the sentence I use all the time is, why do they care? Why do they care? Why do they care? So tell them what you want them to do, but tell them why they want to do it. So if you follow this rule, it will make your life better. Why will it make your life better? Because your laptop won't get seized, because you won't lose data, because you won't, like, whatever it is that that person cares about. Do they care about their customer base? Do they care about their ability to produce reports for the board? Do they care about having their marketing brochures not go awry? Like, you have to think about the person that you're providing that service to, what matters to them, and then tie your compliance agenda in your conversation to their outcome, not your outcome. Because telling people I want to have my, security phishing numbers lower, they're going, I don't know what you're saying and I don't care about it, so please go away, right? So it's finding what matters to the people that you're educating and giving it to them in a view that matters to them.
Well
Yeah,
said.
from my perspective, I agree with Kelly. I think it's a matter of coaching as well, right? So you need to kind of provide that certain level of kind of understanding why people are doing that. People will do it better. But at the same time, when you go back to why you hire people and the kind of the skills, and you mentioned, George, about certification, ticking the box kind of things, I always kind of try to find the right attitudes and motivation as opposed to the right skills. Because I think the skills are very teachable and plenty of courses and training that you can get your team to. But the attitude and the motivation is something that you cannot really is pretty much unique, right? It's individual in a way, right? And that big motivation with the right kind of coaching, you get great results, and you get people that wants to progress and wants to do more and wants to kind of add more value, right? The second point I will always add is empower your team, right? So let them make decisions. Yes, they make mistakes, and you can help them through them. But it's important for them to kind of feel empowered, that they have the option to say no, to challenge the status quo, that kind of thing. So that's great.
No, thank you. I appreciate both of your perspectives there. And I think that's kind of what I was going after with that for everyone who's listening is, you really need to look at our roles, especially as leaders, as being coaches, right? We're not dictating transactional commands. We are trying to coach people to get the best performance out of them. I got one final formal question as part of this before we go into final closing thoughts. But on the issue of people, we currently exist in an era rife with insider risk, be it accidental or intentional. What are some best practices that you've both employed, both in your security operations teams and your organization as a whole, to better protect against these threats? Juan, we'll start with you.
Thank you, George. I think it's just the easiest way, in simple terms, is trust no one. No insider, no outsider, right? Trust no one. And sort of kind of put the practice in place where you actually can verify exactly what people is doing. There is an important element about, especially from the kind of SOC analyst perspective, is really understanding what is normal, what is the best, what is not supposed to happen, right? So, for example, people's work 9 to 5. So if people start connecting at 10 p.m., something is going on, right? So it's going to be able to detect those deviations. And definitely in large organizations, that's not possible. That's not humanly possible in terms of doing that. And that's where you probably kind of need some tools to help you kind of the baseline. But at the end of the day, it's about really understanding behaviors with the organization, understanding how things work, and really be able to understand or to notify or to kind of monitor for or identify when something is deviating from that normal. But in essence, trust no one.
I like that. Kelley?
It goes a little against the servant leadership mode, trust no one, but I agree with you from the security perspective, trust no one. There's good hygiene and we all know that, but do we all do it? So, do we have the appropriate things in place? I would say things like patching, things like multi-factor authentication, these things, we all say them. And back to your point earlier, George, when you're talking to non-technical people in your life, they go, I don't know what you're talking about. What are all these acronyms? What are all these things you're throwing at us? And in our work life, these things are very normal and can be taken for granted. So let's make sure we don't take them for granted to the point that we're not doing them. I worked for an organization that did a true up on patching and said, yeah, we don't think we're applying all the patches, but we don't think it's that bad. And we actually, launched a project and found that we had over 10,000 patches that had not been applied. So think about that, 10,000 patches that are all, as we know, security experts, an exposure point. So, they launched a project and they got it under control. And then following that, which is the important part, a new policy that said we will apply all patches unless we make the conscious decision not to apply it for some business reason. But how many organizations today are not fully patching and are ending up in the news? We all know that. So there's a vulnerability and a bunch of organizations get hit and they find out if they had just patched, some known exposure, they could have prevented that. So the good hygiene, I think, is important. And then I would say the other part, that human side of it, is get everyone on your team, get the whole organization on your team. So we launched our organization, and some of these things, as security people and as IT people, we think it's small and maybe it'll help a little bit. We launched a fish alert button. It's quite simple. In your email, if something looks suspicious, you click the button and it gets reviewed. And most of them aren't reviewed by a human because there's rules that can check to see that it's malicious or not. And people love the button. I get people, I go to staff meetings, I walk down the virtual hall, I go into other Zoom meetings, and people go, that little button you gave us? I love it. I love it. And I say, oh my gosh, this is something we never would have thought would have changed the culture, but it did. And then we added one thing additional to it is when we found it was malicious, we sent them back a thank you note. People are printing their thank you note. They're so excited that they're part of the security watchdog for the company, that they found a malicious attack that could have hurt the company and that they reported it and that they got thanked for reporting it. So we, again, as IT professionals, sometimes forget that human touch of congratulating them for participating in the protection actually matters to people.
That's really cool, Kelly. Actually, it's a really cool example of something to do. And
easy, right?
The tip of the hat to you, man. I mean, that's a really easy win. And I think easy wins need to be highlighted more. So, good job on that. I guess, since we're in our closing minutes here, 30 or 60 seconds or less, final thoughts. One, what do you have to say to the audience? Security operations is a theme.
So the one thing probably I will add, so a great conversation today. Thank you, George and Kelley. The one thing I would like to add is think about your SOC, especially when you outsource it as a kind of your helping hand and the skills required to kind of give you actionable outcomes, right? So avoid sort of thinking about alerts, because chasing alerts is like a chasing, ghost in a way. So it's important that when you kind of hire, you find your partner in crime and for detection and response, is that you kind of put the heavy load to them, not to your team. You kind of focus on what is important for the business.
Definitely. Thank you, Juan. And Kelley?
Yeah, I love the conversation. The only thing I would sort of add at the end is talk to people, share information with your security friends, but share information with people who are not in the field and talk about what they think about security, because you will get different perspectives that will make you realize that what we think is normal and what we think is obvious is not. So it'll help generate those new ideas.
Definitely. And I guess for my own closing thoughts, I would have to second kind of the point from Juan and Kelley, like, to anyone listening, if you have non-technical friends or you have folks who are remotely interested in getting into security, explain to them what it is. Explain to them what it isn't as well. Because a lot of people seem to think that we're on some Tom Clancy movie-esque, like hackers with Angelina Jolie kind of track. And, while there is some elements of that culture in some places in the conference world, I think the average security person, really is just a normal person with a skill set. And, we really have to make this thing tangible and real. I think the responsibility is on all of us to be evangelists for our industry. And I think that once we reach a point where we no longer have to justify the fundamental investment of our existence, then I think we'll really be able to get the best out of people, because the things we'll be worrying about won't be just, am I going to have enough funding to have a job next month? It's, am I going to be able to build the type of organization I know we're capable of doing? That's really kind of the takeaway, is that we all should be security evangelists, and we all should really be passionate about this wonderful thing we get to do. But yeah, that's it for the talk.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.